We've mentioned now this term excellence in real time, and just to make sure that we've defined it clearly, it is the application of the very best judgment for which we're capable in real time. Which the highest frequency of good judgments of all the judgments that we make. Now, let me ask you to think about something as we develop this. I'm going to mention 2 or 3 things, and tell me if you've experienced them or just how you relate to them. The first one is this. Have you ever had this experience? You're sitting at the breakfast table, reading the paper, kind of anticipating getting up and either going to the gym or going to work. And just about the time you're ready to put that paper down, you look over and you notice an expression on your daughter's face. Somehow, you put the paper down, you ask a question or two, you develop a conversation, and certain things come out of that conversation. And later on, you look back and say, boy, was I glad I stopped and asked that question. Anybody had that experience? Some of us have. Second one, how about this one? You're in your car on the way to a cocktail party or perhaps even to work. And then you hear the siren behind you, you get stopped by a policeman for reasons that are totally non-existent to you. It seems like frivolous or no reason at all. And you're a little anxious, a little uptight about the policeman comes to the window, and somehow you decide to get real calm. Say very little. And partially as a consequence, that problem dissolves and goes away and ended in a way that could have been very different than it was. You ever had that experience? Third one, try this. You get up from your desk at your office someday or wherever you are, and you walk around to the drinking fountain, the cooler, and you have a drink of water. And as you do that, you're hearing somebody behind one of the corners really exercising some pretty vicious gossip. About 5 seconds into that, you decide it's totally irrelevant to you and you pay no attention to it. Just like it didn't happen. Anybody had that experience? Well, we've all had it. Anybody? Okay. Let's assume that you've had it. And if you did that, that's excellence in real time. That's absolutely exercising, arguably, the very best judgment for which you're capable. That's all it is. It's fairly simple, not always easy, but it's clear when we're doing it and when we're not. Judgment is not by accident. Judgment doesn't come out of the blue someplace. It's a product of the psychological and emotional position we're in when we make those judgments. Okay, what's important now is how do we practice it? It's one thing to say that it's there and that we're responsible. The other thing is how do we build a game plan to make this happen? What do we want to make happen? What we want to do is increase the proportion of all the judgments that we make that are more good than bad and indeed very good or even excellent. Okay. Issue number 1, we must know what the sources are. There are 2. One is imagination and one is creativity. Imagination, all the alternatives we may conclude. Creativity is connecting the dots. We'll build that out in detail as we go. The second portion of this that we need to understand, actually the third and a kind of a 6th element game plan here. First is definition, second is sources. The third one is what are the impediments? What gets in the way? What are the cataracts over the mind? First, cataract is stress. Very different than when you're not stressed. And the second one is priority confusion. Are we really doing what we ought to be doing at any given time or what we want to be doing? So those are the 2 impediments to the accessing our imagination and creativity and impacting the quality of our judgment. So the next element in this thing is what we believe. Very important. If we believe we're responsible for all the judgments that we make, we're willing to pay attention to the process and consider what we want to do about it, if anything. Second belief that's very important. And that is that we need to be present. We need to live in the moment. This is particularly important around people. Are we aware of what's going on? So those are the 2 beliefs that we need to be. Now the 5th element in all of this are a series of habits, personal habits that we can learn, understand, and implement in ways that constantly draw our attention or at least make us more easily accessible to our imagination and to our creativity, mitigating at the same time stress and priority confusion. Little thing about stress. One thing helped me, never argue with your spouse when you're under stress. I guarantee you it'll pay dividends, and you probably know that already. Now the final component after the habits, the final component is a daily game plan. Really makes a difference. Easy to do, easy to think about, but it does take some discipline, and that is every day we start out identifying our priorities for that day. Mine or myself, take care of myself, take care of my relationships and everything else. So if we have our priorities clear, we tend to schedule our priorities, not prioritize our schedule. So that's one component of that game plan. Second component is a component of the plan which reminds us by the very fact, of doing the plan. We're reminded that we have three elements through which we respond to everything that happens to us. What do I mean by that? Element number one is the notion of whether what's happening is relevant to us. Relevance. My daughter's expression was relevant. That gossip at the cooling, at the drinking fountain, that wasn't relevant at all. And when it's not relevant, we pay no attention to it. When it is, of course, then we consider it. The second filter through which we think about things that happen to us, is it important? If it's not important, it has a very low priority or no priority at all. Finally, is it urgent? Is there something that I need to do now? Well, I think we would agree that it was probably urgent that we sit down and have the discussion with our daughter, my daughter at that time. It wasn't compulsively urgent, but it was appropriate to do that. And that's what we mean by urgency. And by the way, urgency and importance are not the same thing. We confuse those sometimes, and many of us will determine because it's urgent is important. I'd like you to be conscious and aware of it. Okay, when we come back, we're going to build all this together. So at the end of the day, we have a game plan that we can implement right after this program, or certainly no later than tomorrow. And its objective is to keep our attention focused on the quality of our judgment and increase the number that we think are good or excellent.